Hello, and thanks for joining me today. My name is Jeff, and you're listening to episode 16 of the Comic Book of the Day podcast. Boy, where to begin? Where do we start talking about this book for today? This is not the first of a 6 series. This is actually book 6 of a 6-series limited edition series. This is DC, The New Frontier, Issue 6, Book 6 of 6 from November 2004. This is by the terrific Darwyn Cooke, and this is Dave Stewart. This is something that we spoke about earlier. I believe I talked a little bit about Darwyn a couple of days ago or a few days ago when we were talking about that Witchblade comic that I was able to track down. And I talked a little bit about how much Darwyn meant to me and how much I loved the artwork that he did. And this is the book that sort of turned me on to Darwyn Cooke. This is actually book 6 of the book. And I think if memory served, this was around 2004 that I didn't pick this book up in hindsight. This wasn't a book that I collected as after it was published. I recall the dynamic look and design of these covers grabbed me from the very first issue. I remember specifically going into the comic book shop and seeing issue 1 or book 1 of DC The New Frontier sitting on the newsstand or sitting on the comic book stand. And I remember immediately gravitating towards this book. It was the design of the first cover was absolutely stunning, and each subsequent cover of each subsequent book had equally terrific design sense. I don't know how much of you know any of my background, or how many of you know me, or how many of you know what I do, but I work in advertising and design, creative, and technology, and I have a deep appreciation for well-designed things and visually appealing things, and I have a soft spot for good design. And the sort of design of this book alone, sitting on the newsstand or sitting on the comic book stand, is something that it's arresting in how terrific it looks. And this issue is no different. I mean, this issue number 6 is just fantastic looking right out of the gate. The typeface for how the New Frontier, the typeface and the look, the logo of the book, it just has that amazingly wonderful sort of 50s atomic age feel to it just from the get-go. I don't know how many of you are fans of Saul Bass, but this book has a really tremendous Saul Bass look and feel on the front cover. It really does. It has this sort of arresting look. It's just designed wonderfully, and the front cover of this book features the Green Lantern ring. It has the hand of Green Lantern and sort of the Green Lantern ring kind of descending onto the hand. It's a very stylized cover. It's not a drawn cover, so it's definitely something that if you're familiar with Saul Bass, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about as soon as you see it. If you're not familiar with Saul Bass, then by all means do yourself a huge favor and go ahead and look up Saul Bass or Google Saul Bass and see what you think. See how you feel and see if you think that I'm right on the money here. But this is the final book of the series, right? So this is the conclusion to a 6-book series that talks a lot about America and talks a lot about America in the 50s. It takes a different look and feel of the Silver Age. It's looking at the Silver Age and the Atomic Age and the age just after World War II, and what America was doing and the context of America at the time, fighting an emerging Cold War. So this is just after, World War II. During the Cold War, as it starts to ramp up, we've won the war, but we realize that the true enemy is out there on the other side of the world, and it's the Soviet Union and communism. And this sort of ties into that feeling that America had at the end of World War II, where it knew it had won the Great War, but it felt like there was something looming out there, and there was another presence that sought to undermine democracy. I think America at the time was sort of struggling with what the definition of America and democracy meant. I think it's very easy to sort of look at the success of World War II and see what it meant to be victorious as America. But I think when you start to compare the democracy of America to the lifestyle of an emerging country like the Soviet Union at the time, who was emerging as a rival superpower to the United States, and communism and the splitting of Europe and the Berlin Wall, and the idea that you had the Warsaw Pact and the United States and democracy and the NATO alliance. There's a good story here to tell, right? There's a terrific, rich backdrop in which to tell this story of superheroes, the emergence of the Superman, right? The emergence of the idea of a group of people with extraordinary powers who will seek to align themselves with good regardless of what the goals of America are. And a lot of internal struggles within the group to sort of recognize their identity and understand their place in the world and understand their place in the country. I'm gonna, I don't do this very often, but I'll read you sort of the introductory passage on the inside of the front cover, and I think this sort of like sets the tone for the rest of the issue. At what price freedom? America's protectors had gone about their duty of preserving the American way with such zeal, the price seemed to be the very freedom that they vowed to defend. How free is a nation that forces its citizens to subscribe to a government definition of proper thought? Where would Americans find the spark to rekindle the spirit that had created the world's first free nation? As is often the case, it would take an external threat of catastrophic proportions to wipe secular interests off the table and strip existence to its essence. America belonged to all of them, and if they didn't take her spirit back into the collective heart, she would not survive. So there you go. That sort of sets the tone for the rest of these issues. And this book is just a magnificent piece of storytelling. I mean, one of the things that strikes me is the way that Darwyn Cooke is able to use 3 panels throughout the entire story, occasionally breaking up one of those 3 panels with additional panels. But the basic layout of the book is a very simple and straightforward 3-panel telling of the story on every page, right? You have some of the panels, and even the panels that are broken up into sub-panels are actually broken up into thirds. So it's very much a very symmetrical repeating 3 pattern. Again, you break that up. You have, some of these panels have 3 panels within a single panel, but it's essentially 3 horizontal panels per page, vertically stacked. So you have a top, a middle, and a bottom panel, and that methodology or that layout or that way of telling this story is consistent throughout the entire story. And this is really, again, I don't want to give too much away of the story. I don't want to spoil this if you haven't read it, but you have the ability to go get this in trade paperback. You have the ability to pick up these single individual issues. They're not that expensive, and they're somewhat relatively easy to find, and they are definitely 100% worth owning. If you've got a little bit of extra cash and you're willing to spend the money and you really appreciate the finer things in life, then I would wholeheartedly recommend that you do yourself a favor and look for the absolute edition of this book, because taking Darwyn's artwork and enlarging it at twice the size to the absolute format, which is a much larger format printed book. It's a hardcover book in a slipcase with beautiful art on the slipcase of all the entirety of the superhero world sort of coming together at the conclusion of this story to fight the common threat that they have to come together to fight, which again is an external threat, right? That you've seen that theme before in books like The Watchmen, where infighting or fighting amongst yourselves sort of takes a back seat whenever an external threat is introduced. So this is that, that same sort of retelling, but in a different context of a different time and a different era. And it's just absolutely magnificent. It doesn't get any better. And again, if you do have an opportunity to purchase this and get this book and can spring for the Absolute Edition, which, it's available on eBay. You might be able to find it on Amazon. But if you have the opportunity to get the Absolute Edition of this book, then by all means, you should 100% spring for the money and go ahead and get it. It's worth every penny of it. But again, the individual issues should be relatively easy to find. I think at 6 issues, you could probably find them anywhere from $5 to $10 an issue. I'm guessing you could probably look on eBay and find somebody who's selling all 6 issues. I don't believe that there are additional prints of this. I don't believe that such a thing exists. I believe they were only first printing, so you don't have to sort of there are no variant editions. This is just a 6-issue miniseries with 6 individual issues that were just printed the single time. I know of no other reprints. If I'm wrong, I apologize, but I know of no other reprints or no other additional printings of this book. The ending is, it's just a masterpiece. I mean, the way the story comes together and the way they have to utilize the individual superheroes in the story, and how the one sort of ringer in the story, Superman, is taken out of the story very quickly, and which sort of leaves you reliant on the teaming up of the rest of the heroes. And at that point, you start to see how each of the individual heroes, because of the nature of the threat, each of the individual heroes can bring something to the table to sort of group up and come together with a plan that can help them defeat this common enemy at the end. You can't say enough stuff about it. Green Lantern is there, Flash is there, John Jones is there, the Martian Manhunter. You've got Adam Strange. You've got Challengers of the Unknown. You've got dinosaurs. You've got Wonder Woman. You've got aliens. You've got cosmic entities. The Guardians of the Universe make an appearance. You've got Green Arrow for what it's worth. But this is, again, such a terrific story. And then, of course, there is sort of the surprise appearance at the end of the King of Atlantis. So they pull out all the stops. You finally get to see Darwyn Cooke's version of King Arthur of Atlantis, which is interesting. You never much hear Aquaman referred to as King Arthur, but actually, that's sort of who he is, right? His name is Arthur Curry, and he is the king of Atlantis. So by definition, he is King Arthur. But again, Lois Lane making an appearance in there. You just can't say enough about this book. This book works on so many levels. It is superficially an amazing look and feel, and as you dive deeper and deeper into the subtext of this book, and you get a little deeper into the story that it's telling, it's just amazing. It is just something to behold, and I do think it's probably, I'm not going out on a limb here and saying that it's probably one of my all-time favorite comic book series, easily in the top 10, my personal top 10 of all time. And I would place it somewhere near the top of that list as well. It's just something that I can go back to and reread over and over again, and I never tire of it because it's just so beautiful and the story is so rich and so deep that it feels like you're discovering something new every single time you read it. Just as a side note here, nobody draws the Flash better than Darwyn Cooke. I defy you to find someone who draws the Flash and captures the spirit of what that character is any better than Darwyn Cooke does. So if you're a big Flash fan, if you're a big fan of the TV show, or just a big fan of Flash in general, and you haven't read this book, then I would absolutely recommend you to pick this up and don't walk to your nearest comic book shop and grab a copy of this book. So that's it. Head on over to comicbookoftheday.com and take a look and see what you think of the cover. Do yourself a favor and do a Google search for Saul Bass, and take a look at these covers, and then see if you don't agree with me that these covers are inspired by Saul Bass. And then we'll return tomorrow, and we will talk about some other comic books. We will never run out of comic books to discuss. We are the Comic Book of the Day. We are comicbookoftheday.com. We're on Facebook at Comic Book of the Day. We will never run out of comics, and we will be doing this as long as I have breath. So thank you for joining us. Appreciate your time, and we will see you again tomorrow.